Hello everyone! I saw the Wicked movie, both parts, and I want to talk about it. While I was watching it, I had a lot of thoughts, and even after watching it, I was kind of brewing in regards to what I was thinking. And also, I have seen some commentary about the movie, not so much because I did not want it for it to, change my full perception of things. But I did wrote down what I thought about it, and I want to start by saying that I am a fan of musicals. I like Cats. Like the musical Cats is something that I actually like. I'm one of those, and I understand being a theatre kid. I fully get it. I say this because I think that a lot of the discourse in regards to this movie was very much focused on the theatricals of it all and the relationship between the actors as well as the fandom, and there are theatre kids, and I'm saying this because they can be a little bit much, but that's besides the point. I don't want to talk about it as much as I want to talk about the movie itself, and I decided that I want to talk about some positive things and some negative things so we can keep it chill. Let's start with some technical nice things that I like. I really enjoyed the color. I thought that not the color gradation of the editing. Sadly, this is something that 100 people plus have said already. Some people way more are knowledgeable about these things than I am. But yeah, the color grading of the recent, 10 years or even more has been sad. It's so sad. I don't know why. And even in this movie where you see that you have so much color, it's like we have it, but yet we don't have it. And of course, Technicolor from old movies was a whole ordeal on its own, and we cannot fully recreate it. But that doesn't mean that there are no ways in which we could translate the colorfulness of, a costume and the background and the music and all of it. We cannot translate it to to all of these technical aspects. So I have to say that the color grading was a bit not great, but I really appreciated that I saw a lot of the costumes with so many details. I quite enjoyed that. I'm a huge fan of all of the behind the scenes, and I haven't seen the behind the scenes, but just from looking at the movie, you should feel it, and you can feel how much work has been going on. And I think this is a movie in which both parts are really big, like they really went out creating as much as possible, a lot of details, and again a lot of color. And in particular, I wanted to point out two things. First of all, some of the costumes, oh my god, I wish I had those costumes. They're beautiful. The way all of the materials, all of the details, it was spectacular in terms of fashion wise, and also they were really again interconnected with the characters. And I think that it's great whenever you can pause a movie and you see a full character head to toe, and it's not just wearing a shirt. No, the shirt has details, the jacket has details, the pants are put in a way, and everyone is different. I think that was lovely, and I really enjoyed that. I also wanted to point out that I clocked that the room that Glinda is on, especially by the end when she lives in Emerald City, it's Art Nouveau, and I love Art Nouveau. I'm a huge fan of it, but it is a minimalistic type of Art Nouveau, because Art Nouveau comes from the arts and craft movement, which was a beautiful movement that I'm also a huge fan of, that it's very naturalistic. And actually, I just want to, parenthesis, this movement also had a lot of recollection from especially Persian art. And and if you see Persian rugs, you can say it right off the bat how much detail there is, and there's a lot of natural motifs and animals and all sorts of details, and I think it is beautiful. Art Nouveau is one of those things that have come from all of it, all of those changes throughout the years, and I think it's beautiful. But there is a sort of what I like to call a minimalistic Art Nouveau, and I think this is it. And on one hand, I understand the Glinda lives in a bubble. She's reduced in this bubble, So I understand that also the room doesn't have as much personality of hers because she doesn't feel fully part of it, because she doesn't really want to be there. But this is where some of the issues start to arrive, because Galinda wants to be there, and that is something that the movie, up until the end, tells you. She likes that. She wants to be there. So I was really fascinated by the choice of having her room being so empty, especially by the end. You know, you would think that she might, because of her, change throughout the story, but it's not. I think that's kind of interesting. Another thing that I want to talk about is camp. So, whenever I think of camp, all I'm thinking is that image of the girlie from the Met Gala looking camp right through the eye, and then showing up in the most basic thing ever, which some people have said that has turned around and become camp. I don't agree. I actually think it's actually the issue with camp right now, because I love it. Because the idea is this one. I am in my car, I am in my house, singing like a silly person, wearing whatever I want to, creating a whole scenario, doing theatre. That can become camp when it is silly, when it is not well done, but you don't care, you enjoy it. And it's not that I'm trying to give camp a definition, because camp doesn't really have a definition. It's one of those things that if you get it, you get it. And sadly, I don't think people get it, especially in this day and age. I think that some old movies, they still have it. There's sometimes once in a while something comes up and you're like, okay, I see it. But the overall campiness, because of a lot of reasons, has declined. And I think this is a story that is based on a musical, and the musical is really campy. Well, it's not crazy campy, but it is camp enough, because theatre is kind of campy in itself. If you think about it, what you're doing is putting off a play in which people are dressing up often in really wild costumes, and especially Wicked. Like, let's focus on Wicked. The way people are dressing, the songs they are singing, so what they are saying, and the story that you've been told is campy. It's exaggerated, and at the same time doesn't mean that it is not serious. You know what I mean? Like, it doesn't mean that we are making fun of it. It's that we are not worried about looking like losers, let's say. And I think that there's different ways in which you could see camp, and one of them is whenever you think about it as, I don't know how to explain this, whether you see camp as something that is not to be taken seriously, and so you take a literal approach. And this is what I think Wicked did. I think that they basically decided to go for a very literal exploration of the story, but they're not taking the story from the books, they're taking the story from the musical. You know, already that is a fanfic of a fanfic of a fanfic, and we love to see it, but in each passage, in each iteration of the story, things change and things modify. And depends also on the way that you want to tell the story. And I think this story was taken too literal. And this is where it gets a little bit worrying for me, because I have seen some people, when talking about Wicked and talking about the movie in particular, but not only Wicked, but many other things, they say that, well, it's not that deep. You know, if it's camp or it is a musical or whatever, it's not that deep. And things can be very chill. And we can absolutely see things in a very superficial manner, just for the sake of entertainment. That doesn't take away, however, and this is very important, that everything is that deep, because everything is political. And this is where I cannot deny that while I was watching the movie, I felt very off-put, because especially during our current political climate, how can you see that story? How can you get all of those details and information in regards to the characters and what they are living through, and not see the correlation with our history and our lives? And this is when, again, I understand some people can, and we can absolutely just enjoy for the sake of it. That's up to you. That doesn't deny, because 2, 3, and even more things can be true at once, that it is that deep, that there is a message there, and it is important that we acknowledge it. One of the, separating for just a little bit from that point, one of the things that I heard a lot of people saying was that, well, there's some people in the movie that were not great actors or were not great singers, and they kind of ruined the thing. And I have to say that this is one of those cases where it is very subjective. Because, for example, for me, because I saw the musical and I have listened to the musical, the original recording, my brain kind of works in a way in which my ear is interconnected with that. And so if I listen anyone else sing it, I realize that it's not the original one. I prefer the original one. It's just something that is the first time arrives in my brain. That's the one that we're gonna keep. And it happens with all other musicals and all other things. So if I listen to a cover song and it's the first time that I listen to it and I like it, even if the original one is better or whatever, I'm going to be still inclined to listen to that cover. And that is a very subjective thing. That's my own thing. But in a sense, I think that it's kind of positive because I don't care that much. I don't think that not being able to belt and not being able to sing great affects the story. I understand how it is a little bit weird because in the meritocratic world that we live in, technically the person that has the rule has, you know, all of the ingredients to make that rule work. So it does make you wonder, but does it make you wonder really if you understand how the industry actually works? And again, this is one of those cases in which we cannot separate those. You cannot just complain about it and be like, oh, they should have gotten someone else. It should be like, why are we seeing this over and over again? Why are we seeing some people being put in positions where they are gaining money, they are gaining power, they're gaining all of these things, even though they don't deserve it, on paper? Because we were told that it is, people that have certain things that make it to certain things, right? So again, you see already there in that tiny discussion of just that, everything is political, whether you like it or not. And I think even the choices that were okay weren't not able to go full crazy camp mode. And one of the some of the actors, I think that we could have seen them go a little bit more overboard, because again, it's a silly musical, right? It's campy, there's animals that talk, people get into music and they start singing and they have these costumes, so they can, in the world of this story, they can get crazier, right? They can act a little bit goofier. And I think some of them do it, and some of them, I think, they seem like they are enjoying that theatricals, because again, it's theatre at the end of the day. Just because it is on film doesn't mean that you cannot be theatrical. But some of the choices I felt were a little bit downplayed. Like, I feel that I was waiting for more. I was waiting for more of this silliness, but it never got there. And that is because it's a minimalistic approach to acting. When you get the story too literal, and this is what happened in Wicked, we started to be so concentrated in telling the story in a very direct manner that I feel that a lot of it got lost. The way in which you tell a story can be in so many ways, and camp can be a way, as many other genres, to tell something in a specific way without taking away the fact that you're seeing something important. We can be laughing, we can be singing, and we can be dancing all around and be like crazy, and still a point can be made. But I don't think the movie made it work. I think that especially the second act, which already in most musicals, the second act is the not great one. I think that the vast majority of musicals just speak at the first one, and it's just a couple that the second act you're like, oh, okay, I'm actually way more invested. Often not, the second act is a little bit, a little bit harder to go through, especially if it's a long one. So in this case, it did not help at all, because the second act, the part 2, Wicked for Good, felt a little bit long, and it felt a little bit like, okay, can we move? Like, I wasn't invested, and it was because, again, like I was saying before, seeing the themes, so literal that we were taking, I was like, there's not really an enjoyment in this. You're making it a drama. and that's not what the musical is about. And on that note, listen, I might have misread the whole musical, alright? That is an actual possibility. You know, you might understand things in a way or in another. For me, Glinda was never a hero. Now, we're not going to take the story, the original story. We're not going to take that because we're not referring to that. We are referring to the musical, okay? And I'm saying this because the movie is clearly taking the musical, so that's why. So in the musical, Galinda has powers, and I don't understand why she doesn't have powers in this movie, especially when you are taking the road of literal narrative and literal thinking of the story. It's important that Galinda has power because it is important that she and Elphaba are actually opposing figures. Otherwise, what happens is that Elphaba has all of the power, Galinda doesn't. Now, you might be thinking, oh well, but the power is the propaganda, you know, is the figure. Again, start to think about it in real life, you know, the things that have been going on in the last ever, to be honest, but you know, especially in the last couple of years. How propaganda and trying to sell a story of this person who is basically perfect or has the answers and is going to help people be okay, how damaging that can be. And it is power, so we can still say that she has some power, but it's not the point of her power. The point of her power was learning, and both for Elphaba, to use the magic for something that it's not just for themselves. The whole storyline of Galinda is to be better. You actually start being really annoyed by her in the beginning of the movie because in the story, again, in the musical, you're like, oh my gosh, why are you so mean? I mean, like, it is, again, being told in a campy way, so you don't hate it per se. But because the movie makes it so dramatic, you actually start to be annoyed by Galinda, and she doesn't have an arc. She doesn't really change that much, and that's really sad because Galinda's not supposed to be the hero of the story, nor is Elphaba. They're supposed to be just characters that have this humanity in them. They have all of these feelings and they make mistakes and they try to help and they, you know, they are just trying the best. And that gets lost with Galinda because I feel that by the end of the movie she's not that changed, and the whole movie we are talking about the Wicked Witch of the West. From the beginning of the movie we know that there is this terrible person, and even if you haven't seen The Wizard of Oz, it doesn't matter, you get the idea of this terrible human, right? This terrible witch. She's a witch, she looks different, she acts different than all of us, and the point is saying that no, she was a person like everybody else, she just happened to have powers. And it gets into a point in which there is a little witch hunt for her, little witch hunt, and the propaganda is using that against this very powerful person, the only person now in the movie that has powers, because nobody else has magic. Yeah, some people can kind of do some things here and there, but nobody's as powerful as her, and everyone is trying to sell this idea that she's the bad guy, that again, little witch hunt. So the dynamic there, it's already really, you know, on one side. So everybody's against against Elphaba, sorry, besides basically two people, which is Galinda and Fiyero. So what then? Well, we have the encounters, we have the issues that happen here and there. We discover that Elphaba is actually a good person, okay, as the audience. We discover that she actually has a good heart from the beginning. Like, what I think is also so insane is that from even her childhood, we saw she was nice. She's just a nice person, while Glinda has just been trying to be nice in this really contorted way. And this is why I also think that seeing the childhood was a bit because I understand that Galinda might have come from a, well, you know, everybody tells me that I want to be perfect, and I understand where some of her internal issues might come up, but it is never fully explain, and we can guess, sure, we can kind of have some ideas, but again, if you're going to put that there, if you're going to add so much in regards to their childhood and her wanting to be magic but not being able to, but still trying to be perfect, well, then she needs to learn, because Elphaba does. Elphaba learns, but Galinda doesn't. And yes, at the end of the movie, she's like, okay, the animals can be back and everything, but it's like, that's not changing the status quo. Alright, that's not explaining. In the musical, what I gathered was that she was telling the story after everyone had calmed down, so everyone could understand. What we end up with in the movie is that everybody's just sheep, basically, that just follow wherever they talk. Even Fiera at some point says it. There's people just going to be blabbering things that they heard without any truth. And it's like, yeah, apparently, from the beginning, from all the time. There's no point in which the people around, and unless they are some of the main characters in the movie, there's no point in which they have any, and I don't know, they don't have any way of deciding what to do. They have no way to think for themselves, and that remains throughout the whole movie. So all of the changes that happen is because of Galinda. So they all treat Elphaba badly. They all see her in a weird way, which it's also silly. She's green, but there's animals that are talking. Like, get it together. For all of the rest, she's just hanging around. She's not hurting anyone. Anyway, parentheses close. So this is where my brain kind of really, really cannot comprehend this movie and the point that they were making, because I don't think they understand their own point, or worse, they are trying to send a point that I don't agree with and that I actually think it's dangerous. One of the main reasons why Galinda has been able to also get to where she got is because of privilege, for various reasons. And even when she doesn't have powers, things just work out for her. And even with all of that power, instead of again trying to change the status quo and trying to actually make people understand that the Wicked Witch of the West wasn't just the Wicked Witch of the West, we just have like oh, she's not bad, okay, let's move on. And that's really dangerous. Not only that, I think that in many ways, one of the points in which the movie kind of focused on at the beginning, but again then they kind of forgot, was history and the importance of it. We have the whole scenario with the professor talking about how it is important, and Galinda is the one who says it. Oh, who cares about history or what happened? She's the one who says that, and the professor is like, it's really important, because otherwise we make the same mistakes over and over again. And then what happens is that it repeats again, and the animals can no longer teach, can no longer go around, and the whole system is effed up. But nobody cares, because all of them are in a position of privilege, especially Galinda, because everything goes her way at the end of the day, even at the end of the movie. Even when you think things don't go her way, because Fiera is not onto her really, but is onto Elphaba, and Elphaba, is bad, is both as bad, and so she cannot be with her, who is her best friend. Even then, she still kind of gets away with it in a way, and maybe I don't like to say it like gets away with it, because not that she does it on purpose, but there comes a point in which acknowledging our privilege is not just so we can feel bad about it and be like, oh well, I'm supposed to punch myself in the face. No. Acknowledging that there is a system that we live in, sadly, that is completely made up, and that makes so that some people have some privilege that other people don't. It should be a way to understand and be more empathetic. It should be a way to be like, oh, that's fucked up, because I shouldn't be treated differently than anyone else just because of the way I look, just because of the way where I come from, just because of my economical background. I shouldn't have to do that. That's what thinking about privilege and history and how those things come off, that's what's so important, because again, otherwise we repeat it and we see in the movie that all of the animals are again taken away, all of the magic of us, that was actually the magic of not us, but the magic of this land, was fading because of this really weird dude that came out of nowhere and apparently was just lying to everyone. You see how everything is interconnected. So again, thinking that this story, this movie, this musical is not political is just so silly to me, to be completely honest. And so I want to say that it's not just this musical, okay? I'm thinking about, I don't know, Six, for example. Why? Well, it's like, hey, don't just focus on the dude that actually was terrible. Also give a name to the women. Give us some stage. As in, actually, genuinely, try to open your mindset to not just read history from one point of view and just keep it in one straight line. Try to see where all of these people come from. Try to see the dynamics and why of these dynamics. It is really important. It's understanding why of the things that we can understand why they're not fair, where the privilege comes from, and then we might hopefully try to do something about it. And of course, we can talk about Hamilton, which, you know, it's kind of obvious that it is a political thing, but also Grease. Grease, yes, I know. Grease, the random movie from John Travolta, from all of the, and Olivia Newton-John for all of these years ago. Yes, yes, even in that, which is a very campy movie with very silly songs and very silly choreography and all of this. It's a very camp movie. But even then, there's so many aspects about the culture of the time, the thoughts of the time, that you can try to understand, because as human we have this possibility of being empathetic. And that's what movies and theater does. That's what stories do, is that they try to put us into someone else's shoes, go through the story and try to understand a little bit better something. But the main point should be, for what? Well, if you're privileged enough, most of these things are just for entertainment, right? Most of these things is just for, you know, spending some time and then you keep on your life. But so for so many others, and in the history of the world, the telling of stories is because of the meaningfulness of them. It's because of what they are saying, what they actually saying. And we can have so many iterations because of so many myths and legends that have been through so many different societies around the world and civilizations. But even then, you can understand them. Even if they're so old, you can read it and feel empathetic. And that is so important. That's so deep, and I think it's so beautiful. And it's important media literacy, which sadly, it's going downhill. It's going downhill. We know when we are studying literature at school, of course, where you're from, you're going to study mainly a literature for some parts of the world. But the point of that is, again, to be able to comprehend beyond the narrative, the message. Try to catch in the character, in the environment, in the usage of certain words or certain type of ways of speaking. It's in catching all of it in order to understand better so many aspects of our humanity. And I think, again, media literacy is just going downhill. For me, this movie and some of the commentary that I have seen about it has just made me realize that this is like the Art Nouveau in the room with Galinda. It looks nice and you can be like, oh, it's Art Nouveau, but it is minimalistic. Literacy has become minimalistic. It's all on the surface, and unless you've been explicitly told something, and even then, at this point we have reached a point in which it doesn't really matter anymore, because people are so concentrated in themselves, their own story, because they want to be the protagonist without giving space for others. At the end of the day, Galinda became the protagonist of the whole story. It's almost as she's the only one, and Elphaba is just, you know, the second. It should be 50-50, because in theory they both have the same powers, but it's what they do with those powers that actually makes them who they actually are. It's the decision of Galinda of understanding that she was being mean with Elphaba at the beginning and establishing one of the most beautiful things, which is a relationship with Galinda, whether that is friendship or of any other kind. I've seen AO3, I'm not blind to it. Not my thing, not my OGP, but I get it because it's beautiful that two humans can connect on such a deep level and understand each other, even coming from very different things and lives and experiences, but they meet in the middle, and the middle to make things a little bit better. I guess what I'm most worried about is that not just this movie, but in many other things again. This movie is just one example and one way in which I could discuss this. But overall, I'm afraid, I'm worried that this minimalistic thinking that we're having and this literal approach to some things, so direct and so lacking of, wider understanding of things, well, is not really helping us. And at the end, we might not be able to change for good. Overall, the movie was okay. I wouldn't say that I don't recommend it. If you have the time, it takes a long time for the both parts, but if you have the time, however, I would recommend more the musical. I think it is quite fun. I think that, I don't know, it hits a little bit harder, but the movie is alright. Again, there were some good things about it, so I'm not gonna say that it is trash. Also, I don't usually say that about anything because I think it's a bit mean, and nothing is really trash, is it? I haven't seen anything that I would say like, oh, this shouldn't exist. But maybe it's because I don't just watch anything. Maybe there are things out there that genuinely are just not good. But who am I to judge? I'm no one, to be honest. I'm just someone who wanted to talk about Wicked on a random Friday afternoon. Anyway, give me your thoughts, if you have any, in regards to the movie, in regards to what I said, if you prefer the movie or the musical. Have you read the story, the original story? What do you think about that? I'd be very interested to know that. In any case, I hope you have a nice night.